To provide law enforcement with 24/7 access to registry data. We need to involve the Colorado Crime Information Center, which is managed by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and that would give access to officers on the street and in their patrol cars access to registry and Department of Revenue data.
So with that, I'd like to introduce Fern Epstein. There you are, Fern. Fern was contracted through the Department of Information Technology late June, early July to gather requirements. And as you all know, this is really Dan Hartman's project moving forward. Unfortunately, Dan Hartman is still the director of the Division of Racing Events, and he's still the national or international chairman of Racing Commissioners International, and he's in Tucson, Arizona at one of their conferences speaking this morning and could not be here today. So I've asked Fern to come and just give you very generically sort of what the requirements that we've been looking at.
As Matt said, I was brought on board to do a study of the technology requirements for the state to comply with the various statutes that were passed. It was a relatively high-level study. It was a relatively short engagement, about 2 months on a part-time basis, and it finished about 3 months ago. So what's happened since then is Matt said we need to speak to Dan, but I've been informed that progress is being made on a lot of my recommendations. So the purpose of the study was to develop a high-level IT technology architecture for the medical marijuana program. I interviewed people from across the state, both at the Department of Revenue, at the Department of Health, law enforcement, and the technology community to understand what was possible and what was needed. And basically I was asked to figure out what does the state need from a technology perspective to satisfy the requirements of the statute. And to oversimplify, what we found out was that there needs to be some interface between various information technology databases. So the Department of Revenue needs to talk to the Department of Health, and both of those need to be able to talk to law enforcement in order for sharing of information. So in a highly simplified way, that's what needs to happen from a technology perspective. Here are most of the people that were spoken to as part of my engagement, and you can see it was pretty wide-ranging from a state perspective. Spoke to people all across the state and from the vendor community. And as I said earlier, what the basic conclusion was is that there's an immediate need for data sharing. So Revenue needs information from the registry needs information from the Department of Revenue, and law enforcement needs information from both of those organizations. One of the main questions that I was asked to answer is whether it makes sense to integrate existing systems or to replace the entire IT infrastructure as it applies to medical marijuana. My recommendation was to integrate existing systems in the short term, but to replace them in the longer term. The priority integration was with the registry and law enforcement, and the priority replacement was for the registry as well. So my recommendation was that that be the focus of integration and replacement. So in terms of what I identified as critical program activities, it was to provide law enforcement with 24/7 access to registry data. That was pretty clear in the statute as a mandate. And in order to really make that happen, registry backlog, which was when I finished my engagement several months long, needed to be eliminated. So the registry backlog needed to be eliminated in order for law enforcement to have access to complete and accurate data. Here's a high-level diagram for trying to illustrate what the needed system interfaces were. So you have law enforcement at the bottom. You have Revenue and CBLE. Both of them need to interface with law enforcement, and there needs to be an interface between Revenue and CBLE. in those circles are the names of the existing systems as they currently exist now. So revenue has a system that they're using, the registry has a system that they're using, and law enforcement does as well. And data needs to flow in a number of directions. This slide is a demonstration of what kind of data is needed by the various parties to satisfy the statute. So, priority program activities. We talked about the need to eliminate the backlog. We talked about the need to provide law enforcement access to registry data. There's some information that Health wants to start collecting on applications, and so they need to make a decision about what information to gather and how best to gather it. And then they need to make a decision on the next generation of registry cards. So something that's a little bit more formal, a little bit more permanent, and a little bit more dependable than the current registry card that's issued. And in terms of revenue, basically what revenue needs to do is move forward with its rulemaking and making clear to industry and the regulated community what the requirements are going to be. We need to figure out interfaces for revenue as well with law enforcement. And then get the interfaces between revenue and health. The priority is for the registry to be replaced. The second priority is for the revenue system, which tracks the dispensaries, the grows, the MEPs, for that to be the second. And then to come up with a self-service capability so that registrants can go online and change their address or change basic information about caretakers, for perhaps dispensaries to be able to go online and access pretty basic information about registry participants. So a lot of decisions would need to be made about what information would be available through this self-service capacity and then getting that on board. But that would be kind of a phase 3. So phase 1 is getting the registry upgraded. Phase 2 is getting the Department of Revenue upgraded, and phase 3 is to provide this self-service capability. But all of this is, like I said, very mature technology. There are a number of vendors who have systems that can be purchased and put in place by this. The timeline talks about the need to do the interface for law enforcement, and I saw that as probably a 4 to 6 month effort. It would need to happen, need to involve the Colorado Crime Information Center, which is managed by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and that would give access to officers on the street and in their patrol cars access to registry and Department of Revenue data. So I think that getting those interfaces in place is probably a 6-month operation. And the goal is for replacement of the registry probably in a year time, and getting the revenue systems replaced within 2 years.
Revolution.